Sitrep. Debrief situation report.
This is Sitrep, the podcast on Philippine affairs and Philippine interests. I'm Ivan at home from Manila. This during the visit of Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol to the Philippines and to Malacanang in October. Among those that were agreed upon was a launch of a feasibility study of the revival of the much delayed Bataan nuclear power plant. This will carry out a series of thorough feasibility studies to continue progress on the BNPP, which we envision to contribute to the energy security of this country, said President Marcos in a statement to Malacanang earlier this month. To give us his reaction to recent developments and to discuss the future of nuclear energy in the Philippines, we have with us Congressman Mark Cojuangco, representative of Pangasinan and chair of the House Committee on Nuclear Energy. He is also the first Asian and Filipino to win the Distinguished Public Service Award from the American Nuclear Society. So, good evening, Congressman Mark.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, and hello to all your guests.
Thank you. Alex? Okay, so looks like Alex got disconnected. Miss Congressman Mark, I guess we can start off with a few icebreaker questions. You're really known these days as one of the premier advocates of nuclear energy in the country. So perhaps whilst we start off our discussion, you can give us a short overview on yourself and your history. We know you're also a very well-respected congressman, but perhaps also what got you really interested in nuclear energy and in your current nuclear advocacy, because you're one of the loudest, if not the loudest voices for resurrecting the Bataan nuclear power plant in the Philippines.
Okay, so I became a congressman in 2001, and I graduated for after 3 terms in Congress in 2010. And in 2007, during after the election of my last term, my last 3-year term, I was a member, vice chairman of the Committee on Appropriations. And what was assigned to me to defend was the budget of the Department of Finance. And it was during 2007 when I learned that in August of that year, the loan for the Bataan nuclear power plant was fully paid. So that was
Right.
2.12 billion US dollars and 0.699 billion, 699 million US dollars in interest. So the principal was about 1.421 billion US dollars. So at that time, if you recall, um, the energy secretary was Angelo, the general. I forget his name. Anyway, he and then President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo were arguing on television whether an impending supply crisis was coming in 2013. And I think towards the end of 2010, then President Arroyo started realizing that indeed we were going to be short of generating capacity. So in 2007, in August, I decided that since we are having a shortage and since this plant has now been fully paid for, I filed a bill that it should be that the plant should be commissioned because we have a crisis. We have a fully paid for nuclear plant. Nuclear plants are non-polluting. They're very reliable. They hardly use any fuel. They use so little fuel. And compared to the value of imported coal, we would be saving hundreds of millions of dollars every year in avoided fossil fuel importation. So I thought it was a good idea. And I filed my bill. And in 2010, I ran out of time. So I was not able to get it passed on second reading. And my wife took over after that, 3 terms, term limits, and she filed a similar bill. By the way, at that time, I had around 180 plus co-authors. So we had a majority just on the co-authorship alone. So my wife filed a similar bill. Of course, we studied the objections of all the oppositors, and the bill was improved for my wife. And she had over 200 co-authors. So we were really ganado that it would finally pass. But then in 2011, Fukushima happened. And we, my wife and I, declared a moratorium on our advocacy and on the bill itself. Uh, Pending reports from Fukushima on what actually happened. Because we were ready to give up the advocacy if it showed in Fukushima that containment failed completely and nuclear is really dangerous. Turns out that not a single person died, not a single person was hurt because of radiation. And the radiation in Fukushima after the incident uh, remained still lower than the natural background radiation in Seattle or Denver, Colorado, because the rocks in Seattle and Denver naturally have more radioactive substances in them. Uh, and so we decided nuclear was safe. And so after 3 or 4 years, 2011, 2014, 2015, we decided to resume the advocacy. And until now, even when we were no longer in office, we continued as private citizens advocating for this. And until we're here today, where we are. So 2022, I re-entered Congress. I was elected in the second district, another district of Pangasinan. And the speaker recognized that I've been fighting for this for 17 years. And so he created a new committee of nuclear energy. And I was the first elected chairman to this committee. And so we've worked on these bills, two important bills. One trying to form the independent regulatory authority called the PhilAtom. And the second bill is a nuclear liability law, which assigns blame automatically to the operator in the case of a nuclear incident. That's to enable him to, without a court case, collect from his insurance company so that any claimants can be settled immediately. So those two bills, the first bill passed in November of last year, and the second bill passed in end February, early March of this year, 2024, and they have been with the Senate. They are now under the Committee of Science and Technology under Alan Peter Cayetano in the Senate. So we are just waiting for the Senate to pass these bills so that we can vote for them again after the BICAM and hopefully become law so that we can get going with nuclear in the Philippines.
And Representative Cojuangco, what are you hearing from your contacts in the Senate of how the debate is going there? Do you expect that things will pass and it will quickly get the president's signature within this Congress?
Well, I have talked to my senator friends, and those that I have talked to have assured me of their support, and I think there's a majority. The bill has not yet been sponsored. No? It's been going through the processes in the Senate. It went to the drafting service group of the Senate. These are not senators, these are lay people that go through the bills. I find it redundant and bureaucratic, but that's the process. So it went through that. Now it's ready. The first bill, anyway, is ready to be sponsored. And I hope that Senator Alan can give it some time when he returns from the break. We return from the break on November 4. I hope that the budget process, which is now in the Senate, will not block this. I hope that it passes swiftly through the Senate. Bahala na si Alan Peter doon. So there, that's where it is.
All right, thank you. So I guess most of our conversation during this 1 hour, Congressman Cojuangco, will be about the BNPP, the Bataan Nuclear Power Plant, which has been throughout its history regarded as many terms such as a silver bullet, a white elephant, a mothballed piece of technology, and
Yeah.
naturally, you're the person that's the key figure that's advocating and reopening it because you yourself think that it's somehow a panacea or a solution to many of our country's existing power problems. Can you give us perhaps an overview on what is the BNPP? We can start from there. What is the BNPP? Its history,
The,
and what can it actually provide for us as a country?
so the BNPP is a two-loop pressurized water reactor, the latest of the second generation two-loop reactors. The last design that Westinghouse made of the two loops before they went to the AP600 and the AP1000, which are their current reactors today. So this is kind of at the tail end of the first nuclear era of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So it is newer than 70% of all the 94 running nuclear plants in America today. It has three identical siblings, one in Brazil, Angra 1, one in Slovenia, KRSKO, and one in Korea, the Kori 2, 30 minutes away from Busan by car. So it is 100% complete. In 1984, May, it passed its hot functional testing, meaning that they used electricity to run its RCPs, reactor coolant pumps, which are many megawatts in size. So just the act of running those pumps means that the coolant, the water inside the reactor, will get hot because of the vigorous pumping action and will reach operating temperatures high enough to generate steam, to run the turbines, and to generate power on and off for a few months, testing all the systems of the plant. So to say that it was a white elephant is not true because it has actually already generated power. Then the following year in March, an OSAR-2 mission arrived from the IAEA, and Bataan, all its systems were checked, its personnel was checked, whether they were competent and they were doing things the right way, and it was subsequently certified as ready for core loading. The fuel was on hand. In fact, if you read the book of the memoirs of Jeronimo Velasco, he was arguing with the president to let's load this thing with fuel and run it. No? But the American ambassador, Stephen Bosworth, at the time, was objecting. He was an anti-Marcos ambassador. And he was saying that there was no hospital, there was no whatever, superficial complaints, but which he really had no right to complain about because we being a signatory to the 123 agreement, wala po yun sa 123 na requirement. No? So, umabot ng February 1986 and the rest is history. Na EDSA, hindi na tumakbo. What got me angry about Bosworth was that in 2009, in my trip to Korea, I saw in the boardroom of KEPCO a picture of Ambassador Bosworth. After here, kasi he was assigned there to Korea. So that was 86. And sometime 87, 88, he was reassigned to Korea. And there's a picture of him inaugurating Korean nuclear power plants. So his objections were only for political convenience, American interest at the time. So na-sacrifice yung interest natin for for another country. And that
And
upset me.
And perhaps we can go into that before continuing on the story of the BNPP. You mentioned American interests, in your opinion, would be to prevent the Philippines. You're on record in saying that you believe that the goal was to
At
prevent
that
us industrializing, to prevent us getting cheap electricity. What do you think was the reason why they wanted to prevent the Marcos administration from doing this?
at that time, I think it was geopolitics. They didn't want a strong ruler or a strong president to be able to follow maybe the industrial path of Japan and Korea, the Zaibatsus, the Chaebol. Uh, they wanted us poor, maybe because as a poor country, we are easier to manipulate. They wanted us dependent on maybe imported fossil fuels, uh, etc., etc. So we lost our chance to really progress, because if we had had cheap electricity from 1986 onward, let's say half price electricity from 86 onward. Don't forget, after 86, we started going into the brownout years. No, there was generators on every street corner in Metro Manila. I mean, the pollution was really bad, especially in the 90s when we came back from exile. The pollution was really bad because unstable yung grid. So everybody bought their own portable generator, diesel generator. So for me, if we had cheap electricity at that time, 86 onward, I would uh, propose to the audience that baka yung economy natin grew an additional 1% every year uh, over the last, 30 years, uh, had we had cheap electricity. The investors would not have only gone to Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand. They would have also come to the Philippines, siguro. So if our economy grew an additional 1% every year for 30 years, then our economy, just by simple arithmetic, should be 30% bigger today than it was. No? Actually, it's been 37 years. So 37% bigger. So how many million jobs does that represent? How many trillions of pesos in GDP should our economy be bigger today than it is? So talagang we missed the boat by not going nuclear in 86. Because we are a fossil fuel poor country. We don't have our own indigenous coal supply. We have a little gas, but it's running out sa Malampaya. So they're actually preparing by building the LNG receiving terminals. And that will be the fuel of growth if we don't do nuclear. That's even more expensive than coal. No. Um, so there, the energy density of uranium is so high that for a plant the size of Bataan, 620 megawatts, if it were a coal plant, it would have to import between 500 to 700, or let's just say 500 million US dollars worth of coal every year. If it were nuclear, it would only be $20 million. So that is the what makes nuclear magic, which people don't seem to be able to wrap their heads around. The
Sir,
huge,
you
yeah,
mentioned that it's simple arithmetic, that it makes proper economic sense, and yet you hinted, you mentioned the rolling blackouts that plagued the Philippines in the early
yeah,
90s during
yeah.
the first Aquino and during the Ramos administration, which
Yes.
really hampered our industrial growth.
Mm.
Why do you think, if it's such simple arithmetics, why do you think it wasn't open during those administrations? Why do you think
Because
there continues to be sustained political opposition to opening nuclear power from some quarters in this country, and what are the motivations behind those?
because Bataan, the plant, was used as an instrument, a tool to demonize Marcos Sr. So that everything he did was bad. It can't be good. It's corruption. It's like this, like that. I mean, the allegations are there. The basis is the plant. It symbolizes. It was supposed to symbolize that. What these people did not count on was that the twin siblings of Bataan were all successful and generate power to this very day at very low cost. So the truth of the pudding is in the eating, no? So we didn't run ours because we didn't want to give credit to the person who had it built. And yet the three siblings, the three identical plants are running well to this very day. So lahat ng kasinungalingan, buko, hindi maitago yan. And now the world is realizing that net zero by 2050 is impact. Firstly, that net zero by 2050 is impossible without nuclear. That the world needs to triple nuclear by 2050, and that the rich countries will now look for 9.2 trillion US dollars in low interest financing to support nuclear build out around the world. Biglang tama pala si Marcos. Ang hindi ko maintindihan sa ating lipunan, bakit ang bagal po natin magtulak nito? Bakit walang firm decision? We missed the boat. Dapat kung na-desisyonan na patakbuhin na ito on December of last year, tatakbo sana ito bago matapos ang termino ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos. Pero atrasado na tayo. So it will run now if they decide after his term. Baka may mangyari pa, di ba? So sayang, we missed that boat again.
For
No?
you mentioned, for example, the impediments in preventing it from running. How far are we? How many more hurdles does the pro-nuclear side need to jump? And what are the existing impediments which will prevent this thing from running? Like, what are the regulatory compliance that needs to be done? What are the laws that needs to be passed? What's the roadmap to getting this baby up and running?
Actually, kung sa batas lang, may batas tayo sa ngayon. Kahit wala tayong ipasang bagong batas, merong batas. Kasi nagawa na natin ito noong 1986. Na-fulfill natin lahat ng requirements ng IAEA noong 1986. Of course, we are trying to pass new laws para ma-consolidate lahat yan, maging mas up-to-date yung mga numerong nakalagay sa batas, yung mga bagong pag-iisip, ma-incorporate doon. Pero para sabihin mo na walang batas, hindi po totoo yun. We are ready to go. Ang problema is yung attitude ng ating DOE. Masyadong pessimistic about nuclear. Notice that they do not sing the praises regarding nuclear the same way that the Secretary of Energy of the United States does it for nuclear in the United States. Bakit? Bakit ba pinatigil ng ating Secretary ng DOE ang mga compatriots niya na secretary din sa DOST at sa ibang ahensya ng ating gobyerno na to say what is positive about nuclear sa publiko. So sila ang lead agency eh. Bakit ang bagal ng ating DOE pumasok sa mga intergovernmental agreements with over 40 nuclear vendor countries in the world? Dahil kung hindi po pirmado yung mga intergovernmental agreements, maiksing dokumento lang po yun na nagsasabi gagamitin natin ang teknolohiyang ito sa peaceful na paraan at hindi natin gagamitin panggawa ng weapons. Bakit di nila magawa yun? Disempowered tuloy ang ating private sector dahil pag kinausap ang mga vendor sa iba-ibang country, you know, they might not be making nuclear plants, but they might be making a pump for a nuclear plant or an instrumentation for a nuclear power plant. They need, under the laws of these countries, for them to give information to the private sector, dapat pirmado yung agreements na yan. So, ayaw ni Secretary mag-initiate. Ano pa hinihintay niya? Ito na lang free feasibility study. 20 months na po yan, paikot-ikot sa ating gobyerno. Ako po nag-initiate niyan. Dahil yung unang estimate ng KEPCO in 2010 was $1 billion. Under the Duterte administration, 2017, KEPCO updated it to $1.17 billion. And then, ito ngayon, under this DOE, hindi na po KEPCO, KHMP na ang nag-estimate, $2.2 billion na after 5 years. Sabi ko, bakit tumalon ng mahigit $1 billion after 5 years? Kung hindi nyo mapaliwanag sa akin, kung bakit tumalon ang presyo ng ganung kataas in a span of 5 years, pati ako tututol na sa plantang yan. Ang sabi nila sa akin, Congressman, we cannot give you the exact number unless we do a full feasibility study. Sabi ko, it is illegal under the EPIRA law for the Philippine government to spend any money on any study with regarding the building of generating capacity. So why don't you just do it for free by yourself so that we have something to present to our president so that he knows how much it's going to cost? And so they decided, the Korean president decided, let's offer it to the Philippines. The offer was given 20 months ago to the DOE. Pinaikot-ikot nila yan sa ating gobyerno, sa lahat ng ahensya. Diba? It's only because 2 months ago, siguro na tagalan na rin si President BBM, nag-issue siya ng order na may authority kayong pumirma niyan. And so napirmahan. But why did it take so long? 2 years we wasted, not 2 years, 20 months we wasted. So we are moving so slow because of our DOE. Sana tanggalin na yan sa DOE, mag-form na lang ng Office of Nuclear Energy ang ating Pangulo at bigyan ng isang USEC ng mandato na itulak niya na magkaroon tayo ng, dapat may target eh. Dapat sana, kung ako, 16,000 megawatts of nuclear online by 2045. Hindi yung anemic targets ngayon, nakatawa-tawa ng ating DOE. Yung po sana. And if you ask me, why 16,000, I'll explain it to you.
All right, Alex, you want to go next?
Yes. Kasi this month alone, Meralco signed a memorandum of understanding with the South Korean energy company. This includes a potential partnership that will include the potential rehabilitation of the BNPT. What are your thoughts on this? Because the technology they're saying is SMR and also the rehabilitation as well. What are your thoughts on this development
Kung gusto
of Meralco?
natin na mabilisan tayo sa nuclear, wag na natin isipin yung SMR muna. Kasi wala pang mabibili niyan. There's none available to be bought. No? The soonest I see that you can even consider buying an SMR, even a water-based SMR, is 2029, 2030. Wala pa niyan eh. Magkakaroon pa ng design certification. Siyempre, i-debug pa yan, di ba? But you can buy now full-size reactors immediately. You can buy the AP1000, you can buy the APR1000, you can buy CANDU E6, which is 700 megawatts. Yung dalawa, yung APR1000 is 1,000 megawatts and the AP1000 is 1,100 megawatts.
We can see you, Congressman. You were just wrapping up on why a full nuclear reactor is better than a small or medium-sized reactor.
There are only really 3 reactor types to consider at the moment. Why? Because China is out of the question and Russia is out of the question due to the geopolitics. So those are the only 3 that are commercially readily available that have a track record of hindi na first of a kind, no? Mas may chance siya na maging on time and on budget, no? Yung French reactors right now hindi pa nila perfected yung economics niyan, palaging delayed, palaging overpriced. So there are only 3 models we need to. DOE doesn't even realize that. Kung SMR, there are only 3 or 4, no? There are only the AP300, the BWRX 300, General Electric Hitachi, and the Holtec 300. There's NuScale, but nagka-problema din sila. I don't know if they will be economically viable. So those are the 4 SMRs that you can consider. But again, I'm saying 2030 pa yan before we see them actually running and we decide, yes, pwede yan. Ngayon, 70% of our GDP happens between Pangasinan and Batangas. So nandun po ang konsumo ng ating kuryente. So we need to build the plants around this area. So there's Pangasinan, there's Bataan, there's Mindoro, there's Masbate, there's Sorsogon, there's Isabela in the Luzon area. Full-size plants ang kailangan natin dyan. SMRs, when they come, for the Visayas and Mindanao. But at the moment, we will be looking at full-size plants.
Okay. Yeah, Alex, go.
Go ahead. Cong, Mark, kasi for our listeners, one of the major concerns about nuclear energy is safety, especially after global incidents like Chernobyl and Fukushima. For the average listener, how will you address the safety concerns? For example, they're saying na BNPP is around a fault line or prone to tsunamis. Is this the real situation in the Bataan area?
Well, I'm not a geologist, so I take what I say to you from geologists that are experts. And since I have letters from 2009 from FIVOX, who was then the head of that FIVOX at the time was Renato Solidum, who is now the Secretary of Science and Technology. And I have from DNR MGB, Mines and Geosciences Bureau. And then I have the statements of Dr. Caloy Arcilla, now the head of PNRI, but at the time was the head of UP-NIGS, National Institute of Geological Sciences. And he actually went there for 2 months with the team. They dug trenches, they looked for faults, they had instrumentation, ground penetrating radar. They could not find any faults. According to them, the nearest fault is the Iba fault in Zambales, which is 65 kilometers away. The letter of FIBOC says that the safe distance to a trace is 5 meters on either side of the fault. Meaning, if you build a building, as long as you don't straddle the fault, if you are 5 meters on either side of the trace, you're safe because the building will just move with the earthquake. So there is no fault there. So I think you need to speak to the geologist. Now, as far as the seismic intensity is concerned, peak ground acceleration, Diablo Canyon, for example, the nearby fault there was the San Andreas fault, which is a huge fault. It caused the devastating in the early 1900s San Francisco earthquake. So when they built Diablo Canyon, they built it to a seismic design basis of 0.4 G, the same as our Bataan plant. Then a few years after it ran, they discovered a new fault much nearer the plant. And so they calculated the peak ground acceleration that could be delivered by that, potentially delivered by that new fault. And so they revised the design and upgraded it to 0.75 G, which the plant was retrofitted to. So I learned later on that in Japan, some plants are designed up to over 1 G. So just because there's a fault doesn't mean a nuclear plant is ruled out. It means that the geologists have to state what design basis is needed to defeat the peak ground acceleration potential of that site. Doesn't rule out plants. So yun ang dapat ang context na mailagay sa tao. Ngayon, ang height ng plant will determine whether safe from tsunami or not. So in Daiichi, Fukushima, the plant was at 10 meters, but the emergency diesel generators were at 6 meters in a basement. In Bataan, the emergency diesel generators are not in a basement and they are above the road, which is 19 meters above sea level. So if the tsunami that hit Daiichi were to hit Morong, our plant would not even get wet. This bunga po ito ng isang tsunami na tumama sa Mindanao nung pinag-iisipan pa lang yung planta. The plant was supposed to be built in Bagak, Bataan, but since that tsunami happened, they moved the plant to be located at a higher elevation in Napot Point in Morong. So that's why it's there. So that's the story behind BNPP. If you heard the news recently in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, one of those states, I'm not sure where that is. Anyway, the 3 Mile Island site, the site of the worst nuclear incident in America, that accident happened to Unit 2. So now Microsoft contracted the owner of Unit 1, Constellation Power Company, and they contracted to buy all the electricity to be generated by a soon-to-be reactivated Unit 1 for the next 20 years. Watch Bar 2 was initiated 6 years prior to our PNPP 1. So it's older tech, it's a 4-loop, so it has twice the chance of a line break. So arguably, our Bataan is twice as safe as Watch Bar 2 in Tennessee. It was only 60% complete. Ours was 100% complete. In 2009, they decided to complete it,
Mhm.
and in 2016, it was commissioned as America's newest nuclear plant. A record it held until just a few months ago when Vogtle 3 and 4 came online. These are new plants, the only two new plants in America. And then you have the Palisades nuclear plant in Michigan, which is 53 years old. Talagang second hand. Kasi ginamit, no? Nalugi nung nagmura ang gas kasi pumasok yung frack gas, no? But since nagkaroon ng gera, inatake ng Russia ang Ukraine, at naputol na yung linya ng Nord Stream 2 to Germany, America is helping Germany exporting LNG. Biglang nagmahal ang gas. So now they want this to be reactivated. This has never happened in the history of nuclear power, that an already shut down plant is reactivated. The federal government gave $1.5 billion to help in the reactivation of this plant. And there are over 18 plants that already have licenses to go from their initial 40 years to 60 years. And now 18 of them are going from 60 years to 80 years. What is our problem? Safety is not an issue.
I guess that brings us to briefly another question. It's like, what are the technical requirements needed to reopen the BNPP? Because I recall there's issues on the piping there now. There's questions on what sort of reactor. Perhaps give
There
us
is
a quick overview on what's needed to get it
okay.
started.
There's a 15-volume document called the Final Safety Assessment Report, the FSAR. So that document has to be now gone over by the people doing the study to list down everything that needs to be checked. So they check everything and make sure that everything is in accordance with the FSAR. And of course, between the date of the FSAR and today, there's a lot of new rules and regulations regarding lessons learned from all the incidents that happened in between. So the plant needs to be updated as far as all of those new rulings are concerned. These are not major things. These are minor things. And so after 4 years of work, they estimate it will be commissioned if we decide that we want it to run.
And how much would such renovations and a new reactor cost,
Well,
Congressman Cojuangco?
that's
And
a that's a
how will the Philippine government? How do we expect to get our return of investments if we were to pour money into that?
well, like I said, no, in 2010 the estimate was $1 billion. In 2017 it was 1.17 billion, and now it's 2.2. I don't want it at 2.2. I think it can be had for 1.5 billion. A new plant of that size would be somewhere about $3.5 billion. So it's still a good deal at 1.5. What is really valuable in Bataan is not the plant itself. Of course, the plant is valuable. But what is really valuable is the site which can accommodate 3 more plants. So you can build 3 AP1000s there. That's 1,100 megawatts each, plus the 620 of the original plant. That's 3,920 megawatts. That is what is valuable. So that could form Philippine nuclear equity. Those are what I call Philippine nuclear assets. Not only the plant site, the plant, but including the nuclear village and the CBK pump storage in Caliraya Lake in Laguna, which was built to optimize the operations of BNPP. So if we package all of this together, all of a sudden, this plant that we were saying was junk, a white elephant, represents so much value that we can leverage now with the financing. The vendor countries, the export-import banks will finance up to 85% of total project cost. Not only the work that is done here in
Hello.
the Philippines.
Okay.
Yes. Hello.
Uh yes, we can hear you, sir.
Naputol ba ako or what?
Yes, naputo pagka. We can continue, sir. Perhaps our next question can go into why there appears to be strong political reactions on the plan, specifically from the local Bataan congressman, because we saw you speak in your interpellations in the House a while ago, earlier this year, against certain local representatives. And perhaps the question is, what are the interests preventing? You mentioned it's such a boon. There'll be a new nuclear city there, but what's the reason why local politicians seems to be hesitant? Is it simply NIMBYism? Not in my backyard. They don't want the specter of something like Chernobyl on them. Is it misplaced uh, uh, fears? Well, what do you think
No,
is preventing?
you are pandering to, well, not pandering, but you are falling into the trap of continuing the gloom and doom narrative that the Philippine media has had over these decades, no?
Yes, sir.
Which now the Western media is starting to really overcome. So now their discussion, their narrative is no longer about safety. Their narrative now is about can we really afford to decarbonize without nuclear? And the answer is seems to be that we can't. We can't decarbonize without nuclear. So everybody's starting to embrace nuclear. Sana na maging ganon, ano? Kung open-minded ang like the local political leadership in Bataan, if they could be open-minded to really look at the data, the statistics, the history of nuclear safety and how it saves lives because it avoids pollution. Bataan is the center of coal power. And how many Bataeños have gotten sick and have had early deaths because of the dirty coal generation in Bataan? Nobody quantifies that. Nobody complains. And yet, if it were all nuclear, all of these deaths would have been avoided. Thousands of deaths over the last 37 years. So that's the narrative that's the context that now we need to look at this, in my opinion. So, like I said earlier, Bataan was used as an instrument for the demonization of Marcos Sr. But then look at the election record of his son, winning in Bataan, way over the votes of any of the Garcias there, the two Congress people and the governor. And people know that this president, the son of Senior, that the Senior was the one who built the plant. So, why? Bakit ganon? In other words, there is an implicit mandate for this plant to run. The people in Morong miss the jobs of when this plant was being built. The people of Morong and Baga, it is economically depressed area. There's no jobs there. So I hope that the local leadership, will not hold the entire Philippines hostage because we have a lot of value in these plants. It is my right as a congressman from Pangasinan, I'm not from Bataan, to talk about nuclear in Bataan because my district has a stake of what? At least 500 million pesos in that plant. So I have a right to talk about it. Lahat tayo, buong Pilipinas, may stake dyan, may share dyan. bakit hindi kami magsalita? Huwag niyo na kaming i-hostage. Sama-sama tayo dito. You know, 87% SWS survey of Filipinos favor nuclear power. They just say, not in my backyard. But in a lot of places, nag-aagawan na ang Isabela. Kami sa Labrador, Pangasinan. Diba? Mindoro wants it. Masbate wants it. Right? Sorsogon, maybe. No? Northern Samar. Zamboanga del Sur and Sarangani. 8 provinces want this. So, social license, local social license, is a matter of making the people understand what it's all about and also compensating them for the inconvenience of having to face the controversy. So in Labrador, Pangasinan, I said, ask for, in exchange of you allowing them to have this plant in your place, free electricity based on an index year of, say, 2021 or whenever the contract will be closed, say 2024. In Labrador, specifically 2021 times 2, for every 1,000 megawatts, you will allow here for the entire life of the nuclear plant when it's operating here in Labrador. So if there are 4,000 megawatts built there, then that's 8 times your 2021 consumption, meaning there's room to grow. And you will have the cheapest electricity in the entire Philippines. Do you think that the economy, the local economy here will boom because investors will come since you have the cheapest electricity in the Philippines? They believe it.
Sir,
So they think, yeah.
I guess we can just like ask you frankly, so why do you think the local leadership, such as the Garcia clan, is preventing such an economic boom for their local area?
I've answered you twice already. I'll repeat the answer.
Yes.
Because this plant was used as an instrument
Yes,
to
sir.
demonize Marcos Sr. And at the time, the church was part of it. And since that became the political capital of this family, they're having a difficult time reversing themselves, maybe. Maybe it's also for you as a journalist to investigate why is this the case. Because we've listened all of these years for them to come up with credible complaints about what's wrong with having a plant there. And all of their safety claims, their safety concerns have been answered. Lahat po yan nasagot na. All over the world, it's been answered. Not just in Bataan. So, wala na pong natira eh.
Yes po.
Na dapat pang sagutin eh. It's just na ayaw talaga nila, period. No? Meron
Yeah.
din hanggang ngayon na tao na hanggang ngayon takot sumakay sa eroplano. Kahit anong kumbinsi mo, hindi talaga magbabago isip. Eh ganun na sila. Huwag na natin silang pilitin. Ang question, yung nakararami ba sa Morong and Bagak, gusto ba o ayaw? Kaya bang makumbinsi o hindi? Ganun lang ang question po dyan.
All right, sir. And as we wrap up this interview, perhaps, and thank you so much, sir, for taking your time to answer these questions, because I feel it's important to debunk a lot of these myths that are revolving
Yes.
around the BNPP.
We
Yes.
need to address the questions squarely because these are valid questions.
Yes, sir. And I hope you
Yes.
don't feel like offended that I'm going a bit hard on
No.
you on yes, sir.
Not
So,
at all. Not at all.
Yes, sir. And so the last two questions I have in mind that's usually brought up in discussions on nuclear power is number one, brought on by the ecological left when they would say, why can't the Philippines simply get on the green wave? You know, why can't we simply invest in solar power? Again, I remember the interpellation that you had in the House. They're saying, you know, we got success in solar power, we got success in new emerging green technology. Why can't the Philippines simply run on green alone? And I know you on Twitter were pointing out how inefficient green can be. So perhaps you can elucidate on this, sir.
Well, nuclear is now classified as green or clean in Europe and the United States. So what's wrong with nuclear as green? Nuclear is clean yet reliable. Wind and solar are both clean, but they're intermittent and fluctuating. And so there are added costs to the grid to stabilize this power and to build backup capacities, usually imported LNG, to back up this power. So we're talking of additional investments which are never counted when they mention the cost of wind and solar. I think that excluding this information is misleading the people into thinking they're cheap when they're actually making our electricity more expensive. This is what happened in Germany. So now Germany's economy is in trouble. A lot of German manufacturers are leaving Germany and going to the United States or to China, finding other places where energy is available that's cheap, yet clean yet cheap. And they go to places that have nuclear power. Germany imports a lot of nuclear power from France. So, there's some hypocrisy there. The German government is in trouble now. They may be replaced in the next election. So let's watch. Let's see. Why should we repeat or copy what the Germans are doing just simply because they're Germans? I mean, they make mistakes too. They made a big mistake in World War II. So yeah, so they're not God. We were given minds so that we can think. We should look at the examples of. I have a chart showing how France was able to achieve fossil fuel independence in the 70s and 80s in 10 years. Their goal was to achieve fossil fuel independence. They became clean for free by accident, right? So if we're trying to become clean, why do we need to spend money to become clean when we can become clean because we wanted fossil fuel independence to save national wealth, to save our foreign exchange that we can use to build our country instead of burning as fuel? What's wrong with that? That we want to make tipid our katas OFWs, which our families have suffered for because we've had to send relatives abroad to work. What's wrong with that?
And I guess the local green lobby would reply by saying, how can it be green if you're producing waste which will be radioactive for years? And considering we're an archipelagic country, where will we put such waste, sir? Perhaps you can answer that quickly.
Okay, so the waste is actually spent nuclear fuel. It's tiny. And I have infographics to show that to you, but sana next time, I'll give you all the infographics I have. The waste is, the disposal of the waste is prepaid at 6 centavos per kilowatt hour. So in the specific example of Bataan, that's 5 billion kilowatt hours a year. At 6 centavos is 300 million pesos. To get rid of 27 pieces of nuclear fuel assemblies, that's 1 foot by 1 foot, like that, by 4 meters long. You get rid of it in a canister of stainless steel, thick one, maybe half an inch, 3/4 of an inch thick, hermetically sealed, welded, inserted in a borehole 2 kilometers deep, and then 2 kilometers horizontal, steel lined. You insert it there, and then when it's the horizontal portion is full, you backfill it with bentonite clay and concrete, and then it's gone forever. It's attention and cost-free forever. So we have a way, and we have a financing scheme on how to get rid of the waste. Is there a financing scheme on how to get rid of solar waste and wind waste after 30 years when they become scrap? There's none. And it's toxic forever. It will be in junk piles all over the country. There's also a second question. Um, uh, why do you want to bury this waste? No, why not keep it in interim storage? Because we only extract less than 5% of the energy in the once through fuel cycle. If it can be reused 20 times. In other words, it's almost free fuel for future generations. And after you use it 20 times in my grandson's Generation 4 fast reactor, it becomes safe in 100 years and less radioactive than soil in 300 years. So it's a problem that's going to go away later on. By the way, decommissioning nuclear plants is also covered by a 6 centavo separate contribution to another trust fund collected over the life of the nuclear plant. So that's 300 million pesos a year times 80 years. Just the interest income of that will be how much worth. So the land will be brought back to the way it was before the nuclear plant was put there. Can these wind and solar farms promise the same thing? They cannot. And they have to be built 3 times in one lifetime of a nuclear plant because nuclear plants last 80 years. Maybe soon, over 100 years. US NRC is studying whether they should now extend from 80-year limit to 100 years limit. So it's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. Non-issue.
Kong Mark, I've seen a lot of comments from the naysayers and the anti-nuclear lobby. They keep saying that if we are going to have our own nuclear energy plant, it's like they're saying it's a Chernobyl incident waiting to happen. How do you address, since we've talked about safety, about
Well, in
trying
the
to
first place, Chernobyl didn't use water as the moderator. It used graphite. And when you get graphite hot enough, it can burn. Um, Chernobyl did not have containment. That's illegal in all Western nuclear power plants. Maybe you don't realize that after that Chernobyl incident, that was Unit 4, Unit 1 to 3 continued running for another 10 years. The operators were still going to the plant every day to run the other plants that were there. So, in fact, RBMKs are not being built anymore, but there are still some RBMKs running in Russia. There are no RBMKs anywhere else on Earth, and Russia is phasing them out. Chernobyl is in the Ukraine, and the Ukraine is now wanting to order nuclear plants from Westinghouse. So they realize the great benefit of fossil fuel independence from nuclear. They buy their fossil fuels from Russian-controlled countries. They don't want to do that anymore. So, there are naysayers, and I respect them. They have their opinion. They are entitled to their opinion, but not their own facts. I look at the facts. I present the facts. I present the statistics, the data. Not everybody can be convinced. There are people who still don't want to ride airplanes today. You have to respect that. But it's majority rules in a democracy. So I am praying that more people can be convinced and unparalyzed by uh, unjustified fear. We came from a country that believed in ghosts and spirits.
Sir,
So yeah.
sir, perhaps we can go to the last question on my part, which is one of the main pervasive criticisms on the BNPP, which was it was a product of Marcos corruption, and I bet you already know where I'm getting at, meaning that initially there were two bids. Supposedly President Marcos chose the Westinghouse bid over the General Electric one, despite the advice of the National Power Corporation in his own presidential committee, and that initial bid of 500 million ballooned to over 2 billion, and it produced less power than was guaranteed. And apparently, during the entire construction, there were issues on piping, there were issues on safety, and Westinghouse was taken to court in the United States. So perhaps you can debunk on your part this major criticism, because it's something
Yeah.
that usually would come up from liberal circles and from those that, as you said, are still clinging to the euphoria that came after the EDSA revolution.
Well, firstly, that's a nice question because it means that if Marcos chose General Electric over Westinghouse, they would be supporting nuclear power today, right? In other words, it debunks their all the lies they're saying about nuclear. Because had it been the other plant that was chosen, then they would have been all happy. Uh, the General Electric plant is a boiling water reactor. It's the same kind of plant that we find in Fukushima Daiichi. So this accounts for about 25 to 30% of all the nuclear plants in America. PWRs, Westinghouse, which is what we bought, comprises over 70% of the total fleet in America. Meaning, maybe Marcos, after thorough study, realized that and said, why will I go with the minority? I'll go with what the majority American market is buying. And that's a pressurized water reactor. Today, the AP1000 is considered in America the standard nuclear plant that they want to build again with. And in China, it's all PWRs. The Hualong one is a PWR. The VVER 1200 from Russia is a PWR. It's like ours. The EPR in France is a PWR, like ours. So I think, again, in hindsight, I don't know kung chamba or what, tama ang diskarte ni Marcos Sr. in choosing PWR over BWR. So I think that answers it. You know, so 70 to 80% of all reactors in the world today, the entire world, are Westinghouse type PWRs. I think that
And
answers it.
and what would you say to those who would cite the cost overruns of the project, sir?
If you want to look for corruption, look at it in the price difference between Cory 2 nuclear plant and PNPP 1. But put some context into it. Our plant cost 1.421 billion and Cory 2 cost 1.05 billion. There's a difference of 300 or 400 million US dollars. But when Cory 2 was built, Cory 1 was already running. So the pier, the site development was charged a lot to Cory 1. The nuclear village was already in place. The power line to Busan was already in place. The road going to the plant was already built, right? In the case of PNPP, none of these things were built. It was from scratch, from greenfield. And also, a lot of people don't realize that the foundation for PNPP2 is already there. It's not a nuclear plant, but 60% of local civil works, of 60% of the cost of a nuclear plant is local civil works. So if you cannot explain it there, then it's probably corruption. But I think you need to add all those costs up first before you can say it's corruption.
And lastly, sir, what about
Isa pa.
Yes, po.
You cannot you cannot export, you could not export at the time, even today, you cannot export anything nuclear from the United States because we signed the 123 agreement without the stamp of the US NRC. So you cannot corrupt the system and get a substandard part by asking for a commission. That doesn't happen in nuclear, because of the quality control. So we got exactly the same plant that Korea, Slovenia, and Brazil got. In fact, when they were unloading the steam generator, this was a anecdote told to me by the former plant manager of PNPP. The steam generator fell into the ocean at the port in the plant site. And the president of Korea, President Park, called President Marcos and said, you don't need your steam generator just immediately, but we need ours right away. Can we get your steam generator, which is ready already in the United States, and we will replace it with a new one? So ang kinabit na steam generator sa Cory 2, yung unang steam generator was PNPP steam generator. That is a anecdote from the former manager of the plant.
Sir, the anti-nuclear activists would cite the Destiny affair and his kickback cases with the Sandigan Bayan, and along with the Philippines versus Westinghouse case in the district court in New Jersey. Wouldn't that be examples of the kickbacks and corruptions that people would be citing? Or would you have an answer to that?
I will not defend the CINI, but I will cite, not defend, I will cite commercial practices at the time. Usually big manufacturers had agents operating in the local country, and they were entitled to trade commissions, which was usually 5%. So that was normal business practice of the day. So this happened everywhere. We brought suit against Westinghouse. We lost the case in New York. And then we brought the case to arbitration in Switzerland. We lost arbitration in Switzerland. Why did we lose arbitration? Because the arbiter said, there are 3 other plants that are running. They are exactly the same as your plant. It is not running because you don't want it to run. So unless you let it run and prove that it's defective, you have to pay what the plant is worth. We lost that case.
Mark, there is a question from the comment section, and the commenter is asking, how is the imperial law hindering the progress of our nuclear energy development in the Philippines? You mentioned about the government is not allowed to do when it comes to energy generation.
Alam nyo,
yes, can you elaborate more on this?
Yeah. The mere fact na nagre-red and yellow alert tayo, ang ibig sabihin kulang ang kuryente. Ang ibig sabihin, atrasado ang paglabas ng puhunan ng mga pribadong sektor para magtayo ng sapat na generating capacity. Meron dapat yan na reserve capacity. na dapat minamandato yan, hindi voluntary yan. Kasi magiging unstable ang grid kung walang sapat na reserve capacity. Dapat ang batas, nakalagay sa batas na kung atrasado ang pribadong sektor maglabas ng kapital para isagawa ang sapat na reserve capacity, pwedeng pumasok ang gobyerno. Yun ang bakit ang gusto kasi ng pribado is kumita kahit hindi sila maglabas ng kapital. That's the entire point, di ba? So why should the public suffer a lacking capacity because the private sector was delayed? We need a solution for that. So we need to legislate.
All right, Alex, do you have any closing questions? Okay, so looks like my co-host Alex has dropped again. Congressman Mark Cojuangco, thank you so much for taking your time
Yeah.
to speak to us.
Meron lang akong isang gustong i-comment, no, just for the knowledge of
Oh,
our
of course.
viewers.
Perhaps, you can close, sir, by explaining to us the.
No,
yeah.
it's not related to my closing statement. I
Yes,
just want to
yes,
say something. In fairness to Cory Aquino, she issued the executive order, which was a mothballed Bataan nuclear plant. But she issued a subsequent executive order, which is valid to this day because it was a revolutionary government executive order, saying that the government must provide enough funds for the good maintenance of Bataan nuclear power plant so that future generations can decide whether it should be run or not. Nandito na tayo sa future generations. You know, it's been 37 years. Every single government has failed in giving us a successful electricity policy. They've tried all technologies, solar, wind, wave, ocean current, geothermal. Nothing has been able to lower the price of electricity. The only thing left that we have not tried that has been successful in so many other countries, especially countries that are fossil fuel poor like us, is nuclear power. So what are we waiting for?
Cong Mark, there was a technical difficulty earlier, but we were intrigued about the context when you said about something about the 16 megawatt requirement
16.
or capacity. Yeah. Tell us more about this. Yeah.
So I find that the aspiration of our DOE is too pathetic, unambitious, and will not solve, and is actually the most expensive way to build nuclear in the Philippines. When His Excellency Mohammed Al-Hamadi came to the Philippines to see the president, he mentioned that the cheapest way to build nuclear is to build in series at every site, multiple units. He gave the example of his Unit 3 in Baraka in Abu Dhabi, which is already 30% cheaper than his first unit. It happens because of learning. So as you build, your workers become skillful, and then they make they become more proficient at what they do. So it becomes easier and easier to build. So the way the DOE has it is that they want one unit 1,200 megawatts by 2032, the next unit in 1,200 in 2040, the next in 2045, and the last one in 2050. I think mali po yun. Dapat let's already plan for 16,000 megawatts by online by 2045. It means that this president needs to close 6,000 megawatts before his term ends in 2028. The next president, another 6,000, and the next president, the balance to make it 16,000. What is the basis for my 16,000? Our total capacity today is 22,000 megawatts. That's everything, geothermal, coal, gas, solar, wind, everything. Okay? So if NEDA says we are growing, we need to double by 2040, there's 22,000 incremental growth. So if you get 85% of the present 22,000, which is fossil fuel, that's 16,500. So we can grow by 16,000 without touching a single megawatt of the existing coal and gas. So walang inaagaw from anybody. This is just the growth that we need. Now, what happens if it's not 2x? What happens if it's 3x? Then we can even grow bigger. It can be up to 32,000 megawatts. But let's just keep it conservative. Let's just target 16,000. I think maraming space for wind and solar na natitira. Wala pa tayong ginagalaw na kahit 1 megawatt na fossil fuel. Di ba may phase out ito? And these are very old plants. They're 30 years old, 40-year-old plants that will be breaking down soon anyway. So yun, sana ang DOE, yugyugin natin para maging mas ambitious po sila, mas lumaki ang kanilang aspiration to nuclear. Dahil yan po ang paraan para magprogreso tayo, para bumaba ang presyo ng kuryente, para dumating ang mga namumuhunan, para itayo ang kanilang sari-saring negosyo, hanap buhay, industriya, at dito mailikha ang maraming milyong-milyong trabaho na kailangan natin para umunlad.
Last question, Tong Mark. So, how can we involve more people and, of course, spur more grassroots initiative for that more people and more Filipinos be involved in the discussion of nuclear energy?
Kaya nga ako namuhunan ng mahigit 1 oras na dito sa show po ninyo dahil isang tao lang po ako, limitado ang kakayahan sa pagpahayag at tumatanda na rin po ako. I'm 67 now. And kayo ang makikinabang nito, ang nakababata. Ginagawa ko ito dahil gusto ko na ang aking mga apo ay lumaki sa isang first-rate country. Hindi isang third-rate country na hindi nila pwedeng to be proud of. Gusto ko taas noo sila pag nasa abroad sila, sabihin nila, Pilipino kami. And ito ay kung kayo tuwing meron po kayong salo-salo, nagsasama-sama ng mga kaibigan, kapamilya, kapitbahay, etc. etc. Sa lahat ng okasyon, pag pinag-usapan nyo ang energy, pag-usapan nyo ito at kung bakit kailangan ito para umunlad ang Pilipinas. Isa ito sa pinakamalaking issue na dapat harapin ng bawat Pilipino. Energy is directly correlated with lifespan, longevity, happiness, prosperity. Energy per capita energy use. We are 1/20th per capita consumption compared to the average Korean. We are 1/50th the average American. So talagang mahirap tayo. We don't use the energy. Dapat po ang kuryente ginagawa nating alipin para tumulong sa atin, sa ating kabuhayan. Hindi na tayo ang nagiging alipin ng kuryente dahil sobrang mahal ng ating kuryente at unreliable pa. O, yun po ang isipin ninyo. So sana na ako ay nananawagan sa lahat, lalong-lalo na ang mga bata kasi kayo po ang makikinabang nito. Pagtulungan natin at may pag-asa ang Pilipinas.
Thank you so much, Congressman Cojuangco, and thank you so much to our listeners who are tuning in. We are. This has been Sitrep, the podcast on Philippine affairs and Filipino interests. This has been at Ivan at Home and Inform PH from Manila, interviewing Congressman Mark Cojuangco on nuclear energy. Continue to follow us on our social media handles so that you can be able to see an archive of our previous episodes and be updated on future episodes to come. We are at Sitrep PH on YouTube and on X, formerly Twitter, and on facebook.com/SitrepPH. Philippines, thank you and good night. Mabuhay.